Hello, once again, college football fans, and welcome to the SEC, yesterday and today. I am your host, Bird LaCroix, and this is episode number 12 in the first season of our podcast, and we do appreciate your listening and spreading this podcast around. This particular podcast is part 2 in a series on the Iron Bowl. Last week on episode 11, we had Stephen Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine and the Way It Is radio program on, and he talked about the Iron Bowl from the perspective of an Alabama beat writer. And what we're going to do today is bring on one of our friends that's been on a couple of times before, Lyn Scarbrough of Lindy Sports and Lindy's Magazine, and we're going to talk about it from an Auburn perspective. But before we do, we're going to do a look back at yesterday. Now, last week with Stephen, we did all the vital stats, like how many times the game has been played, what the record is for each team in the series, longest winning streaks, largest margin of victory, and so forth and so on. So what I'm going to do this week on part 2 of this Iron Bowl podcast is talk about some of the specific games for just a few minutes. Games, many of them that I've been to, and others that I have seen on TV, and others that I have listened to, yes, on the radio. But they were very much notable games in the series, and we'll touch on those briefly before we bring on our friend Lyn Scarbrough. The first game, let's mention that one, occurred on February the 22nd, 1893. This was a game that was played in Birmingham, and Auburn won 32-22 in that first Iron Bowl. And as I do mention the name of the game as the Iron Bowl in this podcast, once again, I will reiterate that I am a fan of the way it was done before the term Iron Bowl was ever coined. It was the Auburn-Alabama game for Auburn fans and the Alabama-Auburn game for Alabama fans. So that being said, let's move on with episode 2 of the Iron Bowl. Okay, 1948 was the year the series had resumed since not being played since 1906. That's a 42-year layoff, 41 years actually, to be exact, to the date. And Alabama beat Auburn in the largest margin of victory in the series, once again 55-0 at Legion Field. Now, the next year is one I remember my father talking about on several occasions, the 1949 game, which was one of the biggest upsets in series history. Alabama came in a huge favorite in that game. Auburn had only won like a couple of ball games and tied 2 or 3 ball games, but the Tigers were able to put out an incredible victory in the rain at Legion Field by the score of 14-13, with Travis Tidwell being the big hero in that game for the Auburn Tigers. 1964. This was the first time that the game was broadcast on national television. This was the first Auburn-Alabama game that I ever attended in Legion Field, 1964, sitting in the north end zone and watching quarterback Joe Namath hit Ray Perkins on a pass in the second half to give Alabama a 21-7 lead. Auburn coming back in the final moments to cut it to 21-14, but it was too late, and they weren't able to get an onside kick to get another crack at it. Alabama prevailed. Alabama was the number 1 team in the country in that ball game coming into the game, and they remained so. They did lose to Texas in the Orange Bowl that year, but they were declared the number 1 team in the country before the bowl games were played, and they had a perfect record of 10-0 in the regular season. 1967, the game I refer to as Snake in the Mud. I was there in a quagmire, a downpour like I have never seen before or since. And Auburn, it seems like Auburn spent the entire day deep in Alabama territory, but could never put it in the end zone. The game was tied 0-0 at the half. Auburn managed to get a field goal to take a 3-0 lead, but in the fourth quarter, Kenny the Snake Stabler ran 47 yards on an option to give Alabama a 7-3 victory. And that was a tough one to watch, again, for this kid from Lower Alabama. Let's go to 1972. Punt, Bama, punt. Who does not know the history of this game? Auburn down 16-3 late in the fourth quarter before they were able to overtake Alabama late by blocking 2 punts and Bill Newton blocked both of those punts. David Langner returned both for touchdowns, and Auburn pulled out a miraculous 17-16 win over the Tide. And an incredible game that was not on television, and if you weren't able to be there like I was in the Auburn student section, you had to listen to it on the radio. What an incredible game that was. Alabama was ranked number 2 going into that game, and they were headed to the Cotton Bowl to play Texas. Auburn ranked at number 9, I do believe. In 1981, Alabama coach Bear Bryant picked up his 315th career win over Auburn that day. Pat Dye's first year as coach at Auburn. Alabama won the game 28-17. And with that victory, Bear Bryant broke Amos Alonzo Stagg's record to become the all-time winningest FBS coach at the time. 1982, Bo over the top is the way we Auburn fans refer to this game. Bo Jackson goes over the top in that north end zone. Late in the fourth quarter, Auburn wins 23-22. They hold on at the end with an intercepted pass as Alabama was trying to find a last gasp effort. The Tigers hold on 23-22. It broke a 9-game winning streak on the part of the University of Alabama. 2 tough games for Auburn, 1984 and 1985. Alabama wins in 84, 18-17. And 17-15, I'm sorry. Alabama was leading, and they won the game 17-15. But Auburn, Bo goes the wrong way late in the game. Auburn does not go for the field goal to win it 18-17. And Bo goes the wrong way. Brent Fullwood is stuffed back at the 2-3 yard line, something like that. And Alabama held on to win that one. And in 1985, one of the greatest games in the series history, Alabama kicks a field goal by place kicker Van Tiffin as time expires to beat Auburn 25-23, a 52-yard kick that was perfect. It would have been good from 60, I do believe, but a tough loss, one of the toughest ever for Auburn, but an incredible victory for the Tide at the time. Reversal of fortune in 1986, Alabama leading 17-14 with 32 seconds left in the game. Auburn runs a reverse with Lawyer Tillman getting the call. He goes around left end on that reverse to score, and Auburn comes out on top 21-17 there again in 1986. One of, if not the most memorable games for me or anybody that's been a part of this series was in 1989 when Auburn beat Alabama 30-20. The first time the game was played at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and it was an atmosphere like I have never seen before or since. I believe that the Georgia game a couple of weeks ago for Auburn did rival that atmosphere. It was incredible, but this game in 1989 was a thing to behold, and Auburn winning over Alabama 30-20. Alabama was ranked second in the country, and Auburn was in the top 10 also, I do believe, and that shattered the Crimson Tide's hope for a national championship. 1993, one of the games that you had to listen to on the radio if you were not there. Auburn was on probation, and Auburn was also undefeated. Alabama comes into town. Auburn Tigers and Terry Bowden pull away late in the game on a long run by James Bostic, about 70-something yards, to defeat the Tide 22-14. The first game, notably played in Bryant-Denny Stadium, was in the year 2000, and Auburn won a game in the cold rain and snow and sleet. They kicked 3 field goals, and they beat Alabama for that first time at Bryant-Denny 9-0. I think a couple of times around the turn of the century, 1902, 1903, something like that, they played a couple of games in Tuscaloosa, but this was the first in the modern-day history of the series. 2009, a big win for Alabama. They come out on top 26-21. They had to drive the length of the field with Greg McElroy throwing a 4-yard touchdown pass to Roy Upchurch with 1:24 remaining. Auburn couldn't score late, and Alabama pulled out a dramatic win over Auburn in 2009. 2010, who can forget the comeback with Alabama jumping out to a 24-0 lead in the first half before Auburn was able to cut it to 24-7 before the half ended. And Auburn coming back in the second half, winning 28-27 and another one of the all-timers in the series. Of course, the last one I will mention is in 2013. We all know that as the kick six, when Alabama opted not to go for the Hail Mary at the end of the game. They had 1 second left on the clock. They went for the field goal, which fell short 9 yards deep into the end zone. And we all remember what happened. Chris Davis took it 109 yards to the house, and Auburn pulls out an incredible win and goes on to play Florida State in the national championship game. That will do that as far as warm-ups before the meat of our program, the yesterday portion of the program behind us. And now we're going to bring on our good friend Lyn Scarbrough from Lindy's magazine, Lindy Sports. And we welcome you, Lyn, to the SEC yesterday and today.
All right, we should be recording. And Lyn, we're glad to have you with us this afternoon.
Bert, always glad to be on with you. Before we start talking a little football here, I want to say to the people in your audience, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I want to remind people to always be appreciative and say thanks for what we've got in this country, Bert. We're blessed here to have what we've got in this country, to have the freedoms we've got, and we never want to take that for granted. We want to thank God for it. And if you want to take it to the football side, people in the state of Alabama, I know all of our audience isn't there, but we're going to be primarily talking about the Iron Bowl. We got a lot to be thankful for as football fans. Our little state of Alabama that doesn't have as many people in it as probably the city of Los Angeles and the whole state. We sure do find ourselves in this position often with the two major teams in the state playing with a whole lot on the line.
Yeah, we do, and we are fortunate. This has been a great game for so many years. And if you start us off, would you tell us about your first Iron Bowl game? What year it was, circumstances? Give us a little memory on that, if you would.
Yeah, 1957 was the first year. I was 9 years old when that season started, and that was a great year for Auburn. Went undefeated and won the national championship that year. The first Iron Bowl I went to was the 1957 game. Not a great memory for Alabama fans. Auburn won it 40-0. I believe they had it 34-0 at the half. Basically, Auburn kind of called the dogs off in the second half. I don't know what the short score could have been, but it was 40-0. So that was a good win for Auburn on the cusp of Coach Bryant coming. That was Alabama was at a low point, and Coach Bryant was called back in, and that then set up his involvement in the Iron Bowl. But that was my first time to see those two play at Legion Field.
Yeah, and Bryant came along in '58. I believe Auburn won that game, but Alabama won the next 4 games, 59 through 62.
That's right.
Shutouts. Auburn didn't score a point again until 1963, I believe it was, when they beat Alabama 10-8. And
that's right. And an interesting part of that was the second year of that. Auburn had the All-American fullback and place kicker Ed Dobbs, who died in the past year or so down in Mobile. And if you recall, against Florida State, late in that ball game, he was tackled out of bounds and hit a bench, is my memory. And so Ed Dobbs was left out of that ball game. And the best place kicker in the country and the first team All-American fullback. And I believe Alabama won that game 3-0.
They did.
Auburn could not get in a position to where they could try a field goal not having a field goal kicker.
Yeah, that was a tough position to be in. That's back when it was defense. And so Alabama won those 4. Then Auburn picked up their win 10-8 with Malin Kent hitting Tucker Frederickson, I believe, to get the Auburn's only touchdown.
Exactly correct.
I believe Benny Nelson may have run a punt back all the way for Alabama.
80 yards.
And they got 2 extra points. But anyway, we were able to hold on. And Auburn had a big win in that. Went on to the Orange Bowl. Alabama played the Sugar against Ole Miss, and I believe we played Nebraska.
That's correct.
All right. Well, you want to talk about the game this week?
We talk about the game this week. I want to give you. I told you off the air. I want to give you an anniversary wish. You and I have talked. This is the anniversary of the first Auburn-Alabama game you ever went to, which is in 1964, and a classic ball game that was.
Mm-hmm.
That was the senior years of Joe Namath at Alabama and Tucker Frederickson at Auburn.
That's right.
And if you recall that, they had played, this was the 4th time that they had played, and it was 1-1. The freshman season was a 7-7 tie.
Yeah.
My memory is that Namath threw a touchdown pass and Tucker Frederickson returned a kick for a score in that 7-7 tie. In the 62 game was one of those years that Auburn's varsity did not score. And that was the sophomore season for Joe Namath and for Tucker Frederickson and Jimmy Seidel. Then in the 63 game was when Howard Simpson had the great game on defense for Auburn and recovered the fumble, and then Malin Kent to Tucker Frederickson for that score. So then you came to the 64 game when Auburn was supposed to be number one in the country. I still have my copy of the Sports
Illustrated
that has Jimmy Seidel on the front cover with Auburn number one in the country. And they're rolling on fine until I think maybe the fourth game when Jimmy Seidel gets his shoulder busted and he's knocked out for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so then Auburn's season starts going down. They have to bring Tom Brown in, Tom the running back, and have to bring him in at quarterback. And Alabama, in the meantime, is playing for the championship. And you had some really great players on those two teams. Seidel, if you recall, had been the first quarterback to rush for over 1,000 yards the previous year when he was All-American. And then he gets hurt. Namath, I think, had been suspended. And then
Namath, Steve Sloan may have started.
Namath was brought back into the good graces later for Coach Bryant. But anyway, in the 64 game that you were there, Namath throws a touchdown pass. Frederickson scores a touchdown. Auburn is on the Alabama 1 yard line, fourth to go on the one in the fourth quarter, down 21-14, and Alabama puts up a great goal line stand and stops Tucker Frederickson. Some people forget that the margin of victory was a 107-yard punt return by Raymond Ogden.
Yeah,
for Alabama to start the second half.
Yeah, that was a backbreaker, and we were talking about this earlier that Alabama got their first score when there was an errant snap over the punter. He had a punter, Tommy Lunsford, in that north end zone there at Legion Field, and it rolled into the end zone. Alabama got the ball, or either they scored right there on that. I forgot which one.
So yeah, that was a bad era. It was that game, Bird, was the first time that Alabama and Auburn had played on national television.
Yeah.
Was that 1964 game, and a lot of folks claim that was when officially the name Iron Bowl was used for the first time in conjunction with that game. That may be a myth, but
it may be a myth.
That's what the legend is, and you hate to mess up legends.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it was quite a game. It was tough losing that game the first time I saw Auburn and Alabama lose. But Alabama beat Auburn, but I was so awed by the whole experience of just being there in Legion Field, and of course the stadium was divided. The tickets were distributed evenly, and you had the bands on each side, and I think we'd go down to the Tutwiler Hotel and take the bus out to the game in those years, and it was just the pageantry and everything. It was overwhelming, for a young kid. I'm sure it was back in your day when you were going to those early games. And so now let's. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been goodness. How long did we say now since that first?
That's 53 years for yours. I've seen this. The game on Saturday, God willing, when I'm covering that one, will be the 57th time that I've seen Auburn and Alabama play. That's a lot of football.
That's a lot of football between us. There's a lot of Iron Bowls. It certainly is. I am chomping at the bit to talk about this one and to get down there on Saturday and see what's going to happen, because I think it is going to be a Donnybrook. So take it away on how do you see Auburn having to play if they're going to win this football game?
Well, here's the way I see the game. This is a game that on paper, Bird, is about as evenly matched as any that they've had. These teams both have tremendous strengths and very few weaknesses. So that's what you've got. That's what you got playing. Alabama's played strong all year. Maybe not quite as strong for a couple of games there in a row. Auburn has, since the second half of the LSU game, has been peaking and has continued to peak all the way through. It's really hard to find a place to determine where the game might be decided. I'll tell you 2 or 3 things that I would kind of look for. I think from Alabama's standpoint that Jalen Hurts is going to be the one that's going to have to win this ball game.
Yes, I agree.
If Auburn uses the same strategy that they did against Georgia, which why would they not? It proved so effective. You've got Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough, the equivalent of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. And Auburn held Chubb and Michel to a combined 46 yards. That's unthinkable.
On 32 carries, it was like 1.4 yards a carry.
Yeah, 1.4 yards a carry. And so they've proven they can do that. And, Harris and Scarborough are good now. And so are the ones that Auburn could put on the field. But probably none of them are as good as the combination of Sony Michel and Nick Chubb for their experience and what they've done in their careers. And Auburn's totally slammed them down, leaving it for Jake Fromm to win that ball game. And Fromm was not able to do it. He was not
a
able
true freshman. That's asking.
That's right. That's a bad situation we put in, and he's not a guy that could run. Auburn sacked him 4 or 5 times, and he was never able to really make a difference in the ball game. They forced him to win the ball game, and he was not able to do that. If they try that against Alabama, which still may be the strategy to use,
right.
but because of the similarities there, the difference is Jalen Hurts. When Fromm dropped back on 3rd and 7 and had to complete a pass to win it, he either was going to throw an incompletion most of the time, or he's going to be rushed and maybe get sacked. Jalen Hurts has got the ability. If Auburn's defense is not patient enough to be able to contain him and keep him inside and turn him in, then I could see on a 3rd and 7, Jalen Hurts going for 16, 17 yards, or on a 3rd and 6, he goes for 12 or whatever. Because of the ability that he's got, he reminds me of Nick Marshall, who played for Auburn. Malik Willis, quite frankly, kind of reminds me of Jalen Hurts and Nick Marshall as well.
Yeah,
on Auburn's sideline. But I see Jalen Hurts being the guy that's the big difference. I think injuries are potentially going to play a big role in this game in different ways on each team. Alabama has got the injuries at their linebacking core. Understanding one of the guys might be coming back, but Mississippi State, Mississippi State was very effective against Alabama's defense. I don't know if they would have been that effective if Alabama had all of their starters at linebacker. So you gotta factor in the fact that they don't have, probably won't have all their players and probably won't have them all at full strength from what was their defense. Auburn, though, could be a little limited in being able to take advantage of that because of an injury themselves. The 3 best sets of running backs going into this season were Chubby Michelle, Damian and Scarbrough, and Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway. In fact, Lindy's had Cam Petway as second-team All-American. That's how much our experts, our panel, thought of him. Well, he hasn't had a healthy game this entire season. He finally gets back well enough to play against Arkansas in the second half. Gets like 98 yards rushing, scores 3 touchdowns, and gets an injury to his shoulder. So he hasn't been able to get back in the game. Great question whether or not he's going to be able to play and whether or not he'd be effective anyway.
Now, let me ask you something. Gus mentioned at his press conference last week against, I'm just speculating. Gus mentioned at his press conference last week at versus Louisiana Monroe, somebody asked if Cameron Petway would be ready for the Iron Bowl, and he said probably not. And then today he said, how's everybody as far as injury-wise? And he said, I think we should have everybody or something to that effect. What do you can you read anything into that, or am I reaching too far?
Well, you can read it, but it doesn't mean you're going to be reading it right.
Yeah, exactly.
You can read anything. You might be reading it wrong. I remember in 1971, Coach Bryant told everybody in the media up until kickoff that Johnny Musso's hurt toe wasn't going to work, and all he did was get about 200 yards.
He's the MVP that day, wasn't he?
Yeah, and so so who knows what's going to happen. I'll say this: if I was Auburn's coach, and the next time they ask me to make a call, it'll be the first time. But if there's any danger in it, Bird, I wouldn't play Petway.
No, there's no need to.
Because they're going to be playing another ball game in a bowl or somewhere, and chances are that Auburn's going to have Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway back next year for their senior seasons with Jared Stidham as a junior and all those wide receivers. Auburn's offense could be out of the roof next year.
Yeah, a lot of receivers.
And you don't want to lose. Let Cam Petway suffer an injury that could jeopardize that. And so, on the other hand, sure, if he's capable of playing, if he could play and take those hits without a large chance of being injured, why would you leave Cam Petway out of the ballgame? If Alabama could get its starting linebackers back, and if Auburn could get Cam Petway, either of those things could make a huge difference in the ballgame.
Could make a huge difference. Yeah, they absolutely could. And I also saw that Minka Fitzpatrick said he was going to play, but that's him talking too. Now I don't know how banged up, but what the extent of his injury is and how much.
In this ball game, anybody, it's all hands on deck. Yeah. And I'm sure everybody feels that way most of the time. But this game is one of those. It's from the Auburn standpoint. It's sort of a refreshing thing to have it, because Auburn's had a way in the last 15, 20 years that when the game is not really significant, Auburn loses.
Yeah.
And when the game's real significant, Auburn wins.
They do. And
that's more or less what's been happening. In 2004, Auburn had to beat Georgia and Alabama. Now, in fairness, it was not a great Alabama team. But they had to beat Georgia and Alabama in order to go to the SEC championship game and play Tennessee for a second time. And they did that, won it, had an undefeated season, and in my mind should have played for the national championship. In 2010, they had the same situation. They had to beat Georgia and Alabama for the right to go back to the championship game and play South Carolina for a second time, and they did that. And in 2013, again, they had the same situation where they had to win the Georgia and Alabama games. In fairness, in the Georgia game, it took the greatest stroke of luck I've ever seen happen in football. Okay, but it happened to go and play Missouri, not for the second time, but they put 59 or something on Missouri. Well, here they are again with a chance for the third time since 2004 to win Georgia and Alabama in a row to go to the championship game and play somebody for the second time in the season. And Auburn usually wins those.
They have been fortunate to do it.
That's right. They have been. Of course, you say you make your own luck, but still, when that's happened that many times, it sort of gets to be a trend. And I know that Coach Stablen has got to be tired of hearing the statistics, but regardless of where he is coached, every time he plays an Auburn team that's won at least 9 games, he's 0-6. Going if Auburn wins for 0-7, and that's got to be really getting in his craw. The fact that every time Auburn has a really good team, his team loses. If Auburn's not that good a team, his team wins. And at some point that's going to be broken. The old blind squirrel theory. Will this be the year? I don't know. But these are very good teams. It won't surprise me if either team wins. It would really surprise me, I think, if it was a runaway for either team. But then I said that on our radio network the Wednesday before the Auburn Georgia game too. And if anybody told me that in the fourth quarter Auburn would be ahead 40-10 and be putting in some substitutes, I'd have, who in the world could have ever believed that? Obviously, I don't think anything like that's going to happen on either side on Saturday. But stranger things have happened.
Yeah, they have. And one more thing about Alabama before we'll move on to some predictions. Calvin Ridley, we hadn't talked about him, and I know that they're going to have to contain Jalen Hurts. That's a big deal. You talked about that, but they're going to have to do something with Ridley and try to minimize his catches and his yards after catch, too.
Yeah, well, and Ridley gets all the, he's caught 50-something passes, and the next guy's caught like 13. So, I mean, it's an overwhelming thing for Ridley. They got to have somebody on Ridley all the time and always know where he is because he's the go-to guy. But they got 2 or 3 other guys. The freshman guy, Judy, is outstanding. They got some other really good receivers. The key is going to be don't let Hurts have the time to do it. Keep have pressure on him. Auburn's defensive ends, though, they've got to withstand the tendency, the temptation to cut inside and go toward Hurts. They got to stay outside of him and keep him inside so he can get some help. You just don't want to put him on the end and let him be turning the corner on you so he can run in the field. But yeah, you're right. Ridley's got to be. Ridley is the biggest game breaker threat probably in the ball game in terms of being a receiver that could break it open. But Auburn's got a lot more of them than Alabama. But with Eli Stove and Nate Craig-Meyer, with what Darius Slayton's become with Ryan Davis, they've got Slayton's been catching a 40 or 50 yard scoring pass every game, and Ryan Davis has been catching a lot of passes. Stove quick as greased lightning. Nate Craig-Myers came in one of the best wide receivers in the country. I'm not really sure when I think Auburn has had a better array of receivers than they have now. When they had Courtney Taylor and Devin Romashadu and Obamanu, they had some real good guys then. Back when they had Lawyer Tillman was a clutch guy, he's kind of a tight end hybrid. But you may have to go all the way back to when you had Alvin Bressler, Dick Smaltz, Terry Beasley, Connie Briggs, Billy Irwin. You may have to go back to that bunch in 1968, 69, 70 to have as good a group of fast receivers that Auburn has got to throw to, and they've got what may end up being the most accurate passer in Auburn history throwing to them. That's a really tough combination. So while I do think Alabama probably has got the most dangerous individual, Auburn's got 5 guys that you could throw to that could break a play at any time. So it's not an easy thing for a defense to bunch up on Kerryon Johnson, because if you do, you got 4 or 5 guys that can burn you if you give the quarterback time. That's a key deal. Is they got to protect Stidham, because in the games when he's been flushed in the second half against LSU and the entire game against Clemson, he was not effective because the line didn't give him protection. When he's got protection, he can pick apart anybody.
Yes, he can do that. And I was going to mention, you spoke of Connie Frederick in that receiver corps back there. He was also the punter. I don't think we're going to see anybody run 84 yards for a touchdown on a fake punt this year.
No, not on a fake punt. Hey, but always got to be careful that nobody runs 84 yards on a punt. If you've got to find an Achilles heel for Auburn this year, kick coverage may be it, because their kick coverage has not been good, Bird. And I was pointing that out to somebody, and they said, but a couple of times there's been a bad officials call on the block in the back. Well, that's fine. The main one they're talking about is the one at the LSU game, which okay, I'll admit it, that was about as grotesque a miss of a block in the back, where the guy would have probably tackled him, and that punt return would have probably gone 2 yards. Well, that's fine. Problem is, when you're ahead 20-0, you should never be in a position where one blown referee's call can make any difference. So that return punt did not beat Auburn against LSU. Auburn's own ineptness, lack of execution, and bad play calling is what beat Auburn in that ball game. But that was a punt return that did. Arkansas's only touchdown of significance was, I think, a kickoff return.
Yes, it was.
And so Auburn's got to be careful. Alabama's had some trouble fielding kicks, but once they field them, they got some dangerous people. And Auburn needs to be careful, because I'm sure that Alabama's smart enough that they've been looking at the film on these long kick returns that have been made against Auburn and deciding what's the best way to approach that. And those plays count just as much as a running play or a passing play.
Yeah, offense, defense, and special teams. You got to have all 3, particularly in a game like this.
Yep.
And Auburn better hitch up.
Hey, and J.K. Scott for Alabama, he's a heck of a punter. Now, Auburn's walk-on punter that's come in, I think his name's Marshall, last 2-3 games has really surprised people with how good he's been. But Scott's got the ability to pin Auburn deep. Yeah. And if it becomes a field position game, then Alabama's kicking game could win it. If it becomes a scoring game, Auburn's kicking could win it. We have for the last 4 years been seeing who will probably go down as the greatest place kicker in Southeastern Conference history, in Daniel Paulson. He leads the conference in career field goals, in career scoring. He's got going on 200 extra points in a row. And I just realized this stat not long ago. He has attempted, and I think my numbers are right on this, he's attempted 19 field goals over 50 yards in his career. That's a huge number, 19.
That's a lot.
He's got 13 of them. He's hit 13. He hit 2/3 of his field goals of over 50. And I mean, I would be interested to find out how many kickers ever have hit more than 13 50-yard field goals in their career.
Yeah, he's down here.
And so if it comes down to a field goal kicking contest, I heard a guy ask the other day, you think Nick Saban would try another 57-yard field goal to win it? Well, no, I don't think he would, but I think Gus Malzahn might.
He would.
Because he's got a guy that's got a 50-50 shot of kicking it.
That's right. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it came to that.
Well, no, it wouldn't me either. And if I'm Coach Malzahn and I got to go, if I got to kick it 55 yards or go into overtime, I'm sending out Daniel Carlson.
Yeah.
And see what he can do. But there's just so many in a game that's this close on paper against two teams this good. You can just pick so many things that if this goes this way, one team will win. If this goes the other way, the other team will win. It's the kind of deal, as they say in the South, if you don't have a dog in the hunt, then this would be a great one to go to.
You got it, man. And I tell you what, then, let's just get right down into some picking, and we'll save the Iron Bowl for last. Let's start off alphabetically with Arkansas playing at home against Missouri, I believe, on a Thursday. No, it's on Friday. Arkansas and Missouri. How do you see that one going?
Oh, Missouri! I think Missouri wins by a big margin. On the radio show the week, I think the week after, I was in Columbia covering Auburn and Missouri. The next week, I believe, or the next ball game, they played in Athens, and they scored 28 points on Georgia in Athens. Well, Tennessee had scored 0 points against Georgia in Knoxville, and then Georgia goes down and Missouri puts up 28. And I remember saying on the radio show, I said, watch out for Missouri. They're going to qualify for a bowl. They're going to be the hottest team down the stretch. And the guy was talking to him, and he started laughing. And I said, I'm just telling you, they got Drew Lock at quarterback. They got that guy Crockett and another running back. They got that Jamon Moore at wide receiver. These guys have got some good skill position players. And they're, of course, that Purdue, they got beat bad by Purdue at home. There's no way you can explain that. I said, but other than that, they're losing to teams that are going to be highly ranked. And don't and lo and behold, they've won, I think, 5 out of the last 6, and they're bowl eligible. Arkansas, for heaven's sakes, has gone the other direction big time. Arkansas is not as good as Missouri. They're not playing as good as Missouri. I think they know that the doors you ready to slam behind them. And I don't see Arkansas winning this ball game.
I don't either. They can't score the points. They need to beat Missouri.
Missouri will score several touchdowns on Arkansas, 4 or 5 possibly.
They will. They'll wind up 7-5.
Yep.
And if that is the case. All right, the Florida Gators are at home. They're hosting the Florida State Seminoles. Whoever thought this game would have come down to what it does this year? What do you think?
Well, I like Florida to win the game. And I don't have any particular reason other than I thought they played effectively against UAB. UAB's a lot better team than their game last week against Florida. Indicated Felipe Franks, looks like maybe they've established him at the quarterback position. I think Florida will win the game at home. This is their last big hurrah to do anything here. Florida State has still got a chance to go to a bowl game, but for a weird reason. They canceled the game with Louisiana Monroe early.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure they did that, as several teams did, because they thought, oh, we're good enough. We don't need to have that game against Monroe. Well, that game could have been played.
Yeah. Just
like Florida canceled the ball game could have been played. Miami did. Because some, including Florida Atlantic, came up and played a game in Birmingham. I think Auburn offered actually its field to Florida to play a ball game. Well, these teams chose not to play a game. They didn't postpone them. They canceled them. Well, then Florida State's season totally falls apart, and they get beat by 30 by Boston College or something, and get beat by Wake Forest. And so anyhow, they find themselves sitting there at 3-6, and they're not going to a bowl, and they're going to break up the longest bowl streak in the country. Well, they go back to Louisiana Monroe and basically buy Louisiana Monroe to play another ball game the same day as the conference championship game. Florida State is going to be playing Louisiana Monroe for the sole reason, you can say whatever you want to, for the sole reason of trying to save face and go to a bowl game. Florida, whose season is a nightmare and of historic proportion, what if they could, their only consolation, they knock their arch rival, Florida State, out of bowl contention for the first time in 36 years, and then there's Florida State stuck with having to go play Monroe in a totally meaningless ball game that they bought.
Yeah,
and that would be a real ironic thing. I think Florida would like nothing better to do that, and this is not a great Florida State team. It's two bad teams playing each other with nothing on the line except pride for Florida and them trying to squeak out a bowl situation on the other side. So I like Florida to win the game. But it's two bad teams, and nothing will surprise me, but I think Florida wins it.
And for some reason, I got the visitors in this one. I thought Florida State had a good game last week. I don't know if they'll pull it off, but for some reason,
they played Delaware State, and you know they beat them 77-6. Right. You know what happened in the second half of that game?
I do not.
The two coaches got together at halftime and said, let's just play 10-minute quarters instead of 15. Let's get this thing over with. Delaware State's so bad that the coach said, let's have mercy and cut a third of this half out. So they beat them 77-6 with the Delaware State coach agreeing, let's just play 10 minutes and get out of here. So I put no significance at all on the fact that Florida State won that ball game like that.
That was an easy one for sure. And we'll see what happens down there in Gainesville. And we move on now to the good old passion hate Georgia and Georgia Tech in hot Atlanta. Go ahead.
Like Georgia's a better team. They've got something on the line to play for. Georgia Tech is, of course, trying to win another ball game, but Georgia if they lose, everybody's saying, oh, well, Georgia's still in there because they can get to play the Auburn-Alabama winner and go to the championship playoffs. Well, that's fine if they've beaten Georgia Tech. But if they haven't, then it becomes a meaningless deal. It could Georgia could knock off, Alabama or Auburn or whatever and screw that whole deal up, and them already having another loss. Georgia Tech played so badly against Duke. Duke didn't just beat them. Duke beat them soundly. And so that's another reason that I lean toward Georgia, as well as you do remember Georgia Tech going to Athens and winning over there. And so you got revenge on their mind, and you got something to play for, and Georgia Tech's not playing well. So I like the Bulldogs.
I like the Bulldogs, too, and they have a history of beating Georgia Tech at Bobby Dodd, too. I think that's going to hold up. And we move down to, up in our case, geographically, to the Bluegrass State, where Louisville Cardinals go to Lexington to play Kentucky, Lyn.
Well, I think probably the most unknown or unrealized statistic in college football this year is that Louisville's quarterback, Lamar Jackson, is having a much better statistical year than he had when he won the Heisman Trophy.
Than last year, exactly.
He was averaging right at 500 yards a game total offense. I mean, not the team, him. Yeah. And his numbers are phenomenal. And the team itself has not done as well. They're like 7-4 or something like that. And so therefore he's not in the mix really for the Heisman Trophy. But his numbers would have him there even as much as last year. Kentucky has kind of fallen from grace. They did not give a real competitive game against Georgia when a lot of people were thinking they could. I do think Mark Stoops has got their program moving in the right direction, but I see this. And my memory is that Kentucky upset Louisville last year.
Yes, it did.
Okay, and that's another revenge factor like the Georgia Tech thing. I just can't see. I think this could get ugly, and Louisville win it comfortably.
Yeah, Georgia whacked Kentucky pretty good, and they've struggled a little bit lately, as they often do in November. And Louisville should win the ball game. They absolutely should. And now we go back to Red Stick, where A&M's going to visit LSU.
Yeah, I like LSU. This is a game that really doesn't mean much. The thing it might mean the most, and I have no inside information on this, the thing it might mean the most is for Coach Sumlin's career at Texas A&M. A&M has done its usual deal. It starts off, 4-0, 5-1, 5-0, 5-2, gets ranked in the top 20, sometimes in the top 15 or 10, and then they tease their fans, they give them reason to have anticipation, and then they lose down the stretch. Every year. And they got bombed by Mississippi State. They got bombed by Auburn. They still have the record of never having beaten Alabama or Auburn on their home field since they've come into the conference. And they have swooned once again. They're a 15, 16-point underdog, a huge underdog to LSU. They became bowl eligible last week, I believe it was. So that pressure's off of them, so they're all going to be bowl eligible. But I think they're 6-5, aren't they, Bird? And
I think they are.
If that's the case, they lose to LSU. They're at 6-6 after starting out ranked in the top 25, and I think
they beat Ole Miss last week.
That's right, beat Ole Miss, and didn't that move them to 6-5 and put them and make them bowl eligible?
Yes, it did. I think it could have gone to 7. I can't remember which one it is. I'll have to.
But they're a bowl eligible team now, and so that pressure's off of them. And there's nothing big to play for. And I know I was in, covered the game when Auburn played out there. I was in the press box and talked to a number of writers that covered him regularly. And there's A&M fans are getting really tired of being teased, having the rug put out from under them, never being a competitor for anything of any significance. They've got a palace out there. Anybody in this audience that's never seen a game in College Station at the new Kyle Field, do yourself a favor and go out and see Texas A&M play a home game. Most impressive band in the country is their Precision Marchers, and they're playing in maybe the most impressive new facility in the United States, and the fans do not think they're getting their money's worth. So don't be surprised. I have no inside info, but don't be surprised if LSU wins that ball game if Coach Sumlin finds himself called into the office to justify his continuance in College Station, and I think that's what's going to happen. I think LSU wins that game.
Yeah, I think they win, too, and I think they win handily. Well, the Egg Bowl's on Thanksgiving, speaking of Thanksgiving this year, and I think they made a tradition of that. Mississippi State, Ole Miss then.
Well, I think Mississippi State will win the game, but I think Ole Miss upset them last year, is my memory. But this is not a slam dunk for State.
No.
You know, you thought it was the worst thing that could possibly happen when Shea Patterson got hurt, and they bring in Jordan Tamu, who's a junior college transfer, and he has turned out to be a great gift. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next spring in practice when Shea Patterson's back, and you got Jordan Tamu. Week before last, Jordan Tamu passed for 418 yards. He was the leading passer in the whole country for that weekend. This is an Ole Miss team. Everybody thought they'd win 2 or 3 ball games. They're sitting there. I think they're 6-5. Or they might have had to win this one to become bowl eligible. But obviously they can't go to a bowl because of the NCAA sanctions. And the talk is that the NCAA will come out within the next week, finalize what's going to be done against Ole Miss, and that it may be significant. So this is sort of a win one for the Gipper type deal, win one for Coach Luke, and in Mississippi State's season on a bad note. And Ole Miss has got the team that can do that. I'm gonna pick Mississippi State to win the ball game, but they can't overlook Ole Miss just because they're having some problems. This is an Ole Miss team that with Tamu at quarterback is a dangerous team, and they couldn't win the ball game.
Yeah, you're talking about a heated rivalry. That's one that's really heated up over the last few years. And Mississippi State came out kind of flat against Arkansas. I expect them, particularly playing their arch rival, to look a little better and to pull out the win, even if it's close.
Yeah, well, if they don't look a good bit better, they'll lose because they almost lost to Arkansas.
Yeah, they sure did. And now, as I go over to the state of South Carolina, where you got another rivalry game, Clemson and the University of South Carolina Gamecocks, man.
Yeah, I look at this one sort of like I've said on the Egg Bowl and on the Georgia Tech game. This is not a game that Clemson can overlook. South Carolina's a pretty good ball team, and they've won 8 games. And I tell you, if they had Debo Samuel, we had Debo Samuel as first team All-SEC and one of their top threats in our preseason magazine. Debo Samuel, I think he only played in 3 ball games. He already scored like 6 touchdowns. He already had 3 kick returns for touchdowns in the first 3 ball games. He is a tremendous talent, and it hurt them badly when the Gamecocks lost Debo Samuel to the injury. But they still have hung in there, and I believe they're at 8-3. This is not a game that Clemson can take lightly. They're playing the game out of South Carolina, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, okay.
In Columbia.
And that's a loyal fan base. It's not the easiest place to play. I do think South Carolina will win, but don't be surprised if it's a really close game or Carolina figures out a way to pull this thing out. And it's one of those games. Everybody's saying, "Oh, well, this is going to happen with the Final Four." Well, that's because the Clemson-Miami winner will be in there. Well, they will unless Clemson loses to South Carolina.
That's correct.
And then if Carolina knocks off Miami, I don't know that Clemson will get in there with having the 2 losses and just having come off the loss to South Carolina. You got a similar situation with Wisconsin, where Wisconsin's they're saying, oh, Wisconsin's going to be in the thing or whatever. Well, let them lose badly in the championship game. Let Ohio State lose to Michigan, and then turn around and knock off Wisconsin. Well, Ohio State's not going to get in there with 3 losses, and Wisconsin's already, because its strength of schedule is so pathetic that they're already considered down the run. So the South Carolina Clemson game could matter in the big picture because the importance of the Miami game is not nearly the same for Clemson if they've just lost to South Carolina, and not just the emotional thing of losing to your in-state rival. So a lot's on the line. I do expect Clemson to win it, but it will not shock me if South Carolina was to pull this off on Saturday.
Yeah, it's being in Columbia, I think that gives them a little bit better shot, but I'm gonna have to go with the highly ranked Clemson Tigers. I think they're on a mission, and they're probably going to pull it out. But it was another one of those, like you said, it could really be close.
It could.
And right before we get to the Iron Bowl, we have a game. My goodness, Tennessee and Vanderbilt in Knoxville, 2 teams that are just struggling mightily.
Yeah, they're calling it the Oprah game because these are the 2 worst teams in the SEC. Yeah. Keep that in mind for something we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about the Auburn-Alabama game. Who in the world would have ever thought after Vanderbilt knocked off Kansas State early in the year to go 3-0. And that they and Tennessee would be playing at the end of the year with a combined 0-14 record in the Southeastern Conference. That's unheard of. This is painful. I'm going to take Tennessee because they're playing at home. If they're playing at Nashville, I'd take Vanderbilt. It's that way. Tennessee theoretically has better athletes because they're always higher in the recruiting rankings, but you couldn't tell it by the way they've been playing. When you just got beaten by Georgia and by Missouri by a combined 91-17, you can't say much good about the team, and that's where Tennessee finds itself. I would take Tennessee to win the game, but if we still had ties, I'd pick a tie.
Yeah, this might be one of those games like Auburn and Mississippi State back in 2008.
Oh, God, 3-2.
3-2, horrible game.
I was on the sideline for that game. I was supposed to be photographing the game. Well, you might as well not even take your camera out. What was it to take a picture of? I mean, that's about. You remember, Bert? That's about as bad as it gets. Was that 3-2 mess?
It's horrible. And the Auburn Tennessee game that year was awful too, 14-12. But Auburn managed to pull it out of Auburn, but it was miserable.
Not as bad as 3-2.
Yeah, and I've got the home team winning too. I expect Tennessee to win. They do have more athletes, and I kind of feel the same way you do. If it were in Nashville, I'd probably pick Vanderbilt. How do you pick a winner? But I'll go with the home team balls. And so we come to the 82nd Iron Bowl in Auburn in Alabama. Number 1 ranked team versus number 6 ranked team. SEC championship game on the line. Possibly the college football playoff. Take it away, friend.
Well, this game. And I've done some research on this and studied on it this week so statistically. This game is about as evenly matched on paper as you possibly can have. Alabama's got the better record. Auburn's played the more difficult schedule, and Auburn's playing at home. You can look at it individually. You can look at it strength versus weaknesses. This is an extremely close ball game. It could go either way. It could hinge on the smallest of plays on whether or not the way the kicking game goes, or the way a particular player plays, or the way officials call, or a turnover goes. I'm going to take Auburn to win by a narrow margin. I will say 27-21, 30-24, 27-24. I'm going to take it in a close ball game. It will surprise me if either team just runs away from the other one. Of course, I was shocked with Auburn and Georgia too. I didn't think that would be a runaway, but I don't expect anything like this to happen in this game. I think the key for Alabama is Jalen Hurts. I think he can win it for them. We've already seen what Auburn can do when they play when they ganged up to stop the run against Nick Chubb and Stoney Michel. Damian Harris and Lyn Scarbrough are good, but they're not any better than Nick Chubb and Stoney Michel. And those two guys got a combined 46 yards between them in the entire game. Auburn forced Jake Fromm to beat them, and he wasn't able to do it. He's not an accurate enough passer, and he was not mobile enough and had the experience to be able to do that. I think Jalen Hurts is. Jalen Hurts reminds me of Nick Marshall, who was Auburn's quarterback a few years ago. I don't think he's quite as good a passer as Nick Marshall, but he's the same kind of guy, reading the option, being able to get out of a rush, scramble, make something out of nothing. Auburn can't allow him to beat them with his feet. And if he does, if there's a bunch of times when it's 3rd and 6 and all of a sudden he runs for 12, or 3rd and 8 and he runs for 16, Auburn's probably going to have a long day. So I think that's the key there. I think Auburn's key is to be established in the running game and keep the ball. You saw that Mississippi State was able to do that against Alabama. Didn't quite have enough to pull it out, but Mississippi State's not Auburn. Auburn beat Mississippi State 49-10, and it could have been worse. So it's got to be a little concerning when you evaluate if Mississippi State is in fact the 4th best team in the league. Alabama barely beat them, and Auburn beat them 49-10. So if Mississippi State can do something, you would think Auburn probably could do it too. But they've got to establish that, and Auburn's probably going to be playing without Cam Petway again. So Alabama's going to have both heads of their two-headed monster. Alabama's going to have healthy. Auburn's only going to have one in Kerryon Johnson. So Auburn's ability to establish a ground game and have ball control against Alabama's defense. Alabama with Jalen Hurts having the ability to wreck Auburn's defensive plan that they had against Georgia. I think if it's a field position game, I think that the fact that Alabama's got J.K. Scott could be a real difference in their factor. He's outstanding, one of the finalists for the Ray Guy Award as the best punter in the country, and he could be a real key if they could pin Auburn deep and make them have to go for long drives against Alabama's defense. On the flip side of that, if it becomes where the kicking game is a scoring contest, that's a huge advantage for Auburn. They got Daniel Carlson, who is arguably the greatest kicker in the history of the Southeastern Conference. That encompasses a lot. Leads in the history of the SEC, has kicked the most field goals, has scored the most points. He's heading toward 200 consecutive extra points. He has. I know you and I were talking earlier. He has attempted, I believe, it's 19 50-yard kicks in his career. He's hit 13 of them. The very idea that somebody's hit 13 field goals of over 50 yards, and this is a guy who's playing on teams that scores a lot of points. He didn't get to try as many field goals as some people because his team scored so many touchdowns. Yeah. And he's still doing that. He's a huge weapon on that side. So you got kickers on both sides of the ball. I like Auburn's home field advantage. I like the fact of the crowd advantage. So that's the way I'm going to take it. I think Auburn's got the better passing quarterback, but he can run some. Alabama's got the better running quarterback, but he can pass some. These are in a way mirror image teams, and I think that again, same old kind of deal. If you don't have a dog in the hunt, this is a great one to watch, and that's what you're going to have here. I'm taking Auburn in a close ball game. Wouldn't surprise me the other way. But Auburn's been in this position before, and they have come through the last several times they've been in this position. I'm going to take them to do it again.
Yeah, I like very much the fact that the game's at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and that atmosphere was incredible for the Georgia game. I expect it to be similar or possibly even better. I like Auburn in the trenches. I like their 22 against Alabama's 22. Alabama's a little dinged up at some key positions, and I think Auburn is pretty darn healthy, and they're going to be able to put most everybody out there. With the SEC pride sitting out there being able to play Georgia again and possibly advancing to the playoff, I think these guys are on a mission, and I think they might at this stage of the season have a little bit better football team, and I do expect Auburn to win, and I'm going to take it 31-24. So, Lyn, tell us where we can find you out there.
Well, we're this time of the year, we are on the website primarily, www.lindysports.com. Covering games, having a big array of news stories every day, having original columns. I've got a column on right now about on our site and on our Facebook page about the Auburn-Alabama series and touting it as the best college rivalry in the country. We'll be going to press in about 2 weeks with our national championship preview editions. Once we find out who those 4 teams are, we'll do at least a couple of magazines for those teams. People that are in the audience that are familiar with us know that we put the best commemorative editions out there in the field. So we'll be having those come along. Any baseball fans, the Houston Astros World Series Special Edition. We've got some inventory at our office. So if you're a fan of Major League Baseball, particularly if you're a fan of the Houston Astros, we've got the best publication that's ever been done for those guys. And so that's what we got happening. So we encourage people to listen to our radio network. If our show is on an affiliate in your area, come to our website, get our publications, and we'll just continue covering college sports.
Excellent. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Autull, Autull. My personal website, birdlacroix.com, with sports and personal blogs. Also at campuspressbox.com. And this podcast, the SEC Yesterday and Today, episode 12, is found under the Sports Hacks heading. And we thank you for listening. We thank you for being here today. Be sure to read this article Lyn wrote on the Iron Bowl this week, too. And it's really a good one. And I just say to you, be careful out there and love your neighbor.